1 in 4 people in the United Kingdom suffer from hay fever, an allergic response to allergens including pollen. Pollen is a powdery substance produced by the male parts of trees, flowers, grasses and weeds to fertilise other plants of the same species. In individuals who suffer from hay fever, the pollen is mistaken for a threat by the body. This triggers antibodies to be produced and the release of a chemical called histamine. This leads to a whole range of symptoms, including itchy eyes, sneezing, and irritated nasal passages. Hay fever is particularly dangerous for those people who suffer from allergic asthma, with high pollen counts being associated with increased hospital admissions. Not only does pollen have negative implications for health, but it affects our economy through workers having to take sick days due to their symptoms. There are many treatments for hay fever, including tablets, nasal sprays and eye drops. Most include antihistamines, which either block histamine from working or block its release by the body. Corticosteroids can be used to relieve symptoms linked to inflammation. Different plants release their pollen at different times of the year. Tree pollen is released in early spring, grass pollen in late spring and summer, whereas weed pollen is released in autumn. A hay fever sufferer's symptoms will be worse when pollen counts for the specific pollen they are sensitive to is high. Scientists can monitor pollen levels using a device called a Burkhardt trap, which traps pollen grains from the air. The pollen samples are then taken to a laboratory where microscopes are used to count individual pollen grains of different species. This data is used to produce national pollen forecasts and pollen calendars. Pollen forecasts give warning to hay fever sufferers who can take preventative measures such as taking hay fever tablets, changing clothes on returning home, avoiding hanging washing to dry outside, and using air purifiers to filter out pollen particles. Scientists at Aberystwyth University, along with others as part of a project called Pollen, are working to improve pollen forecasts. They will also investigate links between certain pollen types and those days on which plant allergy sufferers and people with asthma are most affected. It can be difficult to identify pollen types using microscopy alone, so scientists at Aberystwyth are using a technique called DNA metabarcoding, which uses the DNA from the pollen to help identify pollen at a species level. Current results indicate that different species of pollen cause different health responses.